First on the agenda, we're going to work the State Fair Board budget. Are there any motions or amendments for the State Fair Board from anybody? Yeah. Okay, go ahead.
Mr. Chair, I move that we pass the State Fair budget favorably.
Second by Representative Baker. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Now.
Because I actually do have discussion, sorry.
Victoria, we just got here. Go ahead, Representative Carlin.
Actually, I didn't have any more discussion. I wanted just to get the process going the right direction. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, it's time for discussion.
Representative Hahn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Quick question. Yesterday, is it Ed?
Yes.
Okay, Ed, here's the question. So yesterday you told us that you operate off of $200,000 a month. That's what you're, and that is with the 25% cut. Okay, so what do you normally, because that's a quarter of your workforce is pretty significant. What is your normal?
Our normal would be probably closer to 300,000. And of course it varies. You can't hardly say that because when the fair starts, our expenses skyrocket because we have all the part-time people we have coming on board. So it varies. And this has been more of a constant because we didn't have the fair. It has expanded.
So we did have enough funds then to be able.
Ed, could you use the mic, please?
Sorry, Ed, I'm about as fancy as you are. It's all right. I wasn't offended. So, so 200,000 then when we are, even when you cut a quarter of your force. So then what is, I'm good. I was trying to figure that out last night in my brain. That's pretty significant, and you've been able to cash flow that pretty easily then, even though you've not had your events.
Right. Thank you, Representative. We have, what we basically had is, when we have the fair itself, why our revenues increase, but so do our expenditures dramatically. So that's part and parcel of that.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Representative Newland.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just real quick, yesterday you did say, though, you were working out of some of your reserves and all right now.
Yes, right now, thank you, Representative. We have received the $1 million, and we'll start drawing that down. We basically have $125,000 in our fee fund account, and we'll start drawing down that $1 million for utilities this month, and that's going to be pretty dramatic because of the weather we're experiencing. So.
Are there any other questions now? If not, I think we can proceed. We did have a second by Representative Baker. Okay, all those in favor of passing this budget for the State Fair out, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Passed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, committee.
We'll see you with the funnel cake.
See you there.
That's right. That's right.
Not the dump.
Yeah. Enjoyed you. Thanks for coming.
Not the dump tank. Not the dump tank.
Next on the agenda is the KDHE budget. Victoria?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let's try not to make it echo. KDHE starts on page 23. And actually, before I started the budget presentation, I just did want to make one plug for tomorrow. Why is it doing that? Okay, maybe if I stand further back, I don't know. Maybe that means WebEx can't hear me. It should be the very first one, hopefully. Okay. Yeah, we'll deal with it. It'll be fine. I'll stand further back. I'm aggressively close. So I wanted to make a plug for tomorrow. Because we've made budget recommendations this week, hopefully tomorrow you'll receive an email from me with the with the recommendations that we've made this week. Don't forget to email me back after you've reviewed those. Like I said, we used to have you physically sign the recommendations, but this year we're having you email me so that I don't have to come into your offices. Page 77, commodities, that last line again describes that scientific testing supplies. And capital outlay, the last sentence again describes that laboratory equipment. On page 77, the governor recommends 2022
for lab equipment. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes, she did
Okay,
not.
Just wanted to make sure.
I have a question. It's a procedural question, and I apologize for those of you who've been on this before. When and if we decide we would like to make some cuts to this budget or some proposed cuts to this budget, do we do that now or will we do that Monday? Now?
Right, yes, this is the hearing, so we'll make discussions and recommendations actually on Tuesday. So this committee doesn't meet on Monday.
Okay. All right, perfect. Thank you.
Leo Henning, are you ready for your presentation? Are you on mute?
Yes, I am. I think I need to share a screen with you, so give me just a second.
Still can't hear you. Try one more time.
Does that work? Did that work?
We're ready to listen to you.
Will that work? Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir. I hear you good.
All right. Little IT glitch. Let me share my screen. All right. Are you ready for me to start?
Continue.
All right, thank you. Again, my name's Lou Henning. I'm the Deputy Secretary and Director of Environment at the Kansas Department of Health and Environment. Thank you for inviting us to talk about our budget. First graph is just an organization graph of our agency. As you can see, there's three main divisions within the department, or within the agency: the Division of Public Health, Division of Environment, and then Division of Healthcare Finance. And that, for most, is your Kansas Medicaid program. Next, our mission statement is to protect and improve the health and environment of all Kansas. The way the Division of Environment does that is we ensure that you have clean air to breathe, clean water to drink and use, and then clean soil to live on. These are the federal acts that we implement within the state. These acts, as you can see, have been around for many, many years, so there's nothing new about these. These federal acts were put in place for the state to implement, and most states implement most of these instead of EPA. These are all typically permitting laws that allow disposal or emissions of, whether it's to the air, to the water, or so these are permitting programs. A typical workflow for the permitting programs is we receive an application to run a landfill, or to emit, have a discharge to a stream, or have emissions from a pipe to the air. We receive that application, we review that application, make sure it's all there. We issue a permit with conditions in it. Then after that permit is issued, it goes into compliance, which is inspections usually. We go to make sure that the permit holder is following the permit. We often provide technical assistance to help them stay in compliance. But finally, as a last resort, we do have enforcement actions that we can take. So basically, we are the Environmental Protection Agency, EPA, within the state of Kansas. So these programs have been delegated to us from EPA to implement. The way it works is we provide a work plan to EPA. Those work plans usually surround targets for inspections and permit actions. EPA provides program review. They'll come over, they'll look at our files, they'll make sure that we're implementing the program correctly. And then for doing those things, they'll provide us some federal funding to implement programs. What we give back to EPA is program outcomes, how well we've done. And we report those to them. They wrap them up for every state, and then they provide that information to Congress to show that we are meeting the goals of each one of those acts. EPA can insert themselves into our process along the line anywhere that they would like to. If they feel like we are not taking adequate compliance efforts, or they're not in a timely manner, they can step in and do that themselves. The other thing is, if they feel like there's complete program failure, they can actually take the program back from KDHE, from the state. So a little bit about our staff. Here's a listing of the disciplines that we have here at KDHE. It's a highly educated staff. They are highly dedicated, and it's a good group to work with if you're a scientist. So there was a question about our staff and where we are from an earlier group, so we put this together. Here's a distribution of KDHE employees. We have the 6 district offices that are colored there. We have an additional office in Frontenac, and they implement the SMCRA federal rules for coal mining. And then we have a satellite office way out west in Ulysses, and most of the folks there work on livestock facilities. Here's a little cheat sheet for you to understand what programs are in which bureaus. We have 6 bureaus, and if you want a quick reference as to if you have a question about where something is being worked at, this would be a good slide to keep around. I'm going to go through these fairly quickly, the 6 bureaus. The first one is Environmental Laboratory, Health and Environment Laboratory. They perform all of the environmental testing for us. And for us, when I say that, a lot of our programs send their samples to the lab to have them analyzed. Also, they analyze well over 95% of the drinking water samples for the drinking water supplies in the state. The health sampling is just that. It is testing for health. It includes the newborn screening program, sexually transmitted diseases, influenza, TB, food poisoning, white powder, and what has kept us most busy lately is COVID testing. The last 2 are the breath alcohol program. That's for law enforcement, for making sure that they are certified to take breath alcohol tests that would hold up in a court of law. And then the last one is the lab certification programs. And we have folks that go out to private labs to make sure that private labs are following the methods, are providing reliable data so that everyone can make good decisions on the data that they're receiving from those private labs. Next one is the Bureau of Water. It's mostly about wastewater treatment and discharges to surface water. It's also administers the drinking water program in the state. It also sets quality, surface water quality standards. Lots of monitoring and reporting in that program. Setting the standards is always interesting. And then reducing pollutant loads to our surface water. The last one is the state revolving loan programs. And those programs issue low interest loans to improve wastewater and drinking water systems in the state. Bureau of Waste Management. They are the group that permits all the landfills in the state. Also, they permit all of the hazardous waste facilities that store, transport, and dispose of hazardous waste. Other things that they're involved with is composting, recycling, household hazardous waste programs in the counties, the waste tire program, and then they also help with illegal dumps and city repairs on city dumps, and they issue grants for recycling. Environmental remediation, that's the cleanup program. They clean up underground storage tanks or gas stations most of the time, and they're involved with sites that range everything from a Superfund site in Cherokee County to a small dry cleaner site in anywhere. So anyway, there's like 6 or 7 different programs under that. But any cleanup program is within the Bureau of Environmental Remediation. They also have redevelopment programs that try to move contaminated sites back into productive reuse. And then the last one is they have the coal mining restoration reclamation work down in southeast Kansas. Field services, that's our district offices that I noted earlier. Uh, those district office folks are our eyes and ears. They provide support to the locals. They also do all the complaint investigations, and they do the inspections for the programs here in Topeka and provide the technical assistance out in the field. Livestock is a permitting program for feedlots, then to control the waste from those. Watershed Restoration and Protection Strategy, which is also known as the RAPS program, is our non-point source program that is funded through EPA. It is a program that tries to implement best management practices in a watershed to reduce runoff and pollution into our streams. The Local Environmental Protection Program is we provide technical support to the county sanitarians to work on mostly septic tank issues. And then the last one is the Drinking Water Protection Program. And that is a program that assesses groundwater contamination that could be impacting public water wells. And the idea there is to find a solution to a problem before the problem becomes at such a magnitude that the well can no longer be used for drinking water, or if it does, it will be required to install a treatment system that is very expensive, especially to very small communities. And then the last one is the air permitting program. They implement the Clean Air Act, KDHE, which is that permitting program that allows air emissions. They also have two other smaller programs, the asbestos program, where they license contractors to do asbestos work in the state. They also ensure that the asbestos that is removed is disposed of properly. And then the lead program for homes. That program trains contractors to help abate lead paint in homes. So that is a very quick rundown of what KDHE does. I hope that helps you understand all the things that we do touch and manage. So here's a pie chart of our funding, and this is for 2021. And we have trust funds, mostly the underground storage tank trust fund, which generates 28% of our budget. We do this year, our federal portion is $39 million. And I guess the one thing I want to point out here was when this budget was produced back in July, these were estimates of what the COVID testing requirements would be. Our normal federal funding that we receive is about 22 million less than what this budget was. So this one has quite a bit of money for COVID testing in it. And even back in July, when we put in $20 million here for COVID testing, we had no idea of how much testing we were doing. So this pie chart is a little odd from what our programs usually look like. This is not a normal funding source. We do not normally get $39 million in federal grants to run the programs. It's usually more around 18 million. In 21, we have 4.6% SGF, which is 4.3 million. We receive 4 million from the state water plan, and we collect 18 million worth of fees. And those biggest fees there are from the air quality fee fund, and then the solid waste tipping fee. And then the rest are just application and permitting fees. So that's our funding sources. For our expenditures, contractual services are 28 million, and that is normal and full year. Salaries and wages of 33 million is a normal thing. What is not normal in our expenditures, again, related to COVID, is the commodities. There's probably an additional $14 million in commodities listed there, and that is to buy test kits and for the COVID testing. And then the capital outlay is about 5 million more than what it normally is. And that is for purchases over $5,000 for lab equipment and vehicles and other capital improvement type purchases. Again, a normal is not $6 million. It's more or less around $500,000. But again, COVID has caused us to have to buy a lot of equipment out of the lab to keep up with the pace of the COVID testing that we need. And the last part is the aid to local, and that is pretty much normal with our environment budget passed. And that's just pass-through money that goes out to locals and counties for grants, also to help implement some of our programs like air emissions and watershed improvement and HAB, harmful algal bloom work and things like that. That is pass-through dollars, and that's a normal amount. So in 22, I'm not going to go for this in nearly as much depth because this is what I would consider our normal budget. The only thing I would want to point out, which is the most concerning to me, is that our state general fund has been reduced again by about $450,000. That is concerning, but this is more of a normal budget for KDHE as far as sources and expenditures. So going on, I just want to expand a little bit more about the funding for the program. The red line is the money that we receive from our federal counterparts to run the programs. The green line represents the fees that we collect, and then the blue line is the state general fund that we receive. And as you can see by the graph, our support from the federal government to run these programs continues to go down. Our state general fund to run these programs continues to go down. And so therefore, our only option is to raise fees to make up the differences. And that is concerning. And I know that I've heard from many people that we don't want to pay any more fees. So, and I know the legislators feel the same way. But we can't keep the programs running if we're going to continue reducing the fees and that if we continue reducing the state general fund. And to that end, here's the state general fund picture over time. We used to receive almost $8 million in the state general fund. We are now going to be down below $4 million, and with the governor's recommendations in FY22. The issue there is that we are instructed to raise our fees to make up the difference. It's hard to raise fees right now for anyone. So it's concerning is all I'm going to leave that at right now. So that $437,000 of reductions that we are being asked to take in 22, this is how that $437,000 is going to be allocated amongst the 4 bureaus that receive state general funds. So you can see that most of that for beefs, they're going to have to absorb that reduction in their PFOS program. The Bureau of Water, they're going to have to make that up in fees from other sources. BER, same, is going to have to come up with fees to cover that. And then Cahill is looking at reducing our testing for sexually transmitted diseases. It's the only way we're going to make this budget work. So back to Cahill, we did have a request for new equipment, $250,000 in 21, $295,000 in 22. These enhancement requests have been denied again. We have some very old equipment. It is unstable in many ways, and we continue to go along with these, but sooner or later, we are going to have to replace this equipment. And I just hope that someone is hearing me with this, because we are taking 130 some thousand from them in state general funds, and we're not allowed them to replace their equipment. So accomplishments. Cahill provided 245,000 COVID tests in 2020. To think about where we were in February, where we had no ability to test for COVID at all, to right now where we can do 7,500 COVID tests a day. We have ramped up that program significantly, and hopefully this is not a long-term commitment, that once we are over the pandemic, this will become more manageable. But we have done some Herculean work to be able to do this in a very short time frame. Kansas Air, you didn't know, is meeting air quality standards throughout the state. We have no area that is out of attainment. And that's a huge accomplishment, and it's not too many states can say that. The Bureau of Environmental Remediation installed a water treatment system at the city of Claflin's public drinking water well. It had become impacted with carbon tet and 1,2-DCA, which is a gasoline additive. That system cost about $1.3 million to install, but now the city of Claflin has a long-term solution for a contaminated well. And this year we finished the next 5-year waste management plan. If you have any questions about trash or composting or recycling or anything related to solid waste, I would suggest you look at that plan, because it is informational. For Wichita, we completed a $55 million loan to them through our state revolving loan fund to start a new drinking water facility there in Wichita. That's just one loan of many to come. We expect that we will probably ultimately loan them about $250 million total. And the last one that should be of interest is we partnered with General Mills to pilot a carbon credit program. And just a very brief overview of that is industry needs to be able to buy carbon credits if they are going to be carbon neutral and be able to market their products in many countries in the world. What this program does is look at farming practices, and it will look at how much carbon credit can be assigned to certain best management practices, with the idea that someday a farmer will be able to sell those carbon credits to companies that need that carbon credit as a source of income for sequestering carbon into the soil. And then by doing that, we are also improving the soil health of the actual farm field. That's an interesting project, and it may be very good things in the future. For challenges, in the upcoming years, EPA goes with greenhouse gas emissions, how they're going to regulate them. Right now, I cannot tell you where they're going to go with this, but I can almost guarantee you that something's going to happen along those lines somewhere, somehow, over the next 4 to 8 years. So we're all just kind of sitting on the side to see what comes out. But we know, I feel fairly confident we're going to see something come out on regulating greenhouse gases. Program funding, I've already talked about that. We're being pinched and we're being instructed to raise fees. I know that raising fees is a difficult pill to swallow, So it puts us in a real spot as to what we do. Small drinking water systems. The smaller systems are having a hard time complying with all the federal requirements of the Safe Drinking Water Act. And so we spend many, many hours trying to keep these small systems in compliance. It is just an ongoing issue that I don't have a magic pill to tell you how to fix it. Unfortunately, it's going to be a burden on our smaller water communities. Perfluorinated chemicals. This is a new chemical. It's not a new chemical. It's a new chemical as far as being an environmental concern. We've come out, EPA has, that this is a fairly highly toxic, highly carcinogenic set of chemicals. The problem is that we've used these chemicals in almost everything that we touch and use in normal life. It ranges from Teflon to Gore-Tex clothing to wrappers all around hamburgers to firefighting foam. We don't know how much of an issue this is going to be in our state, but it is one that we are starting to look at. The Cahill building replacement, right now with Cahill is in a 1950s hospital out at Fords Field. That building is near its end of life. There's been some discussion about moving Cahill into docking if that ever moves, or to building a standalone Cahill building. But we are either going to have to invest a lot of money into the current facility, or we're going to have to find a new facility for Cahill to be located in. Employee recruitment retention, it's a challenge, especially with engineers and geologists. We just cannot compete in the open market to attract someone to come in the door. And then if we do find someone to come in the door, to keep them here. Over 80% of our people leave state employment within 5 years of being hired. So we are constantly hiring, training, and watching them walk out the door. And it's difficult. The last thing is IT upgrades. Customers want us to upgrade our IT systems. We would love to upgrade our IT systems, but it's hard to find the funding to upgrade IT systems when we are being pushed so tight on our budgets through this process. So with that, the last slide is just my contact information. I have an additional 10 slides behind this. If you want to look at the slide deck, it talks about more about our accomplishments and concerns, but I don't want to cover them here because I know you want to spend some time asking me some questions. So I will stand for questions.
Any questions? Representative Hahn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, sir, for your presentation. Quick question for you. Do you have any programs concerning cattle and carbon footprints?
Cattle and carbon footprints?
Yes, sir.
No, ma'am. Our program for cattle is under the Clean Water Act, where we manage the waste that comes from the cattle to make sure it doesn't impact surface water and that it is applied to field at agronomical rates. And that is it.
Perfect. That's exactly the question. That's exactly the answer I was hoping you would say. Thank you so much.
All right.
Representative Newland.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Henning. It's kind of a pleasure and all, because this is the second time today I've got to hear your presentation because I was in the Water Committee also. So glad to have you back.
Well, I almost apologized at the very beginning for those folks that sit in the Water Committee because the first 10 slides are pretty much the same.
That's right. My question is for you because we're short on time on questions this morning. The tire program fund, those funds, I know that the fee that we pay when we get new tires put on, does that go directly into KDHE, or where does that go?
Yeah, and I'm going to say what I think is correct, but I think when you dispose a tire, you pay a 25-cent per tire fee on that. That fee goes to the tire program, and most of that money in the tire program historically have gone to clean up tire piles around the state. There's been some really big abandoned tire piles discovered. We haven't had one recently. I think the last one was about 2-3 years ago, but that is typically where that money goes. We also will kick that out in grants, and I want to say around a $400,000 a year goes out to grants for people to usually counties, to help them on projects. A lot of it goes actually to schools too. Buy the rubber products from recycling the tires to use in playground areas and parks and things like that. But that's where that money goes, is to clean up tires and to go out as grants.
Well, thank you for your presentation. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Henning, I've got a couple of questions for you. When you say that you collect a lot of fees, how hard would it be to get a list of who pays fees and how much and who all you affect or touch in the state of Kansas, so we kind of see where that might come from? Is that something you could get for us?
I can give you the program pretty easy and their fee collection. It would be difficult for me to then go in and say who pays them. That would take a while. But I can tell you which programs collect fees and how much is generated in those fees. We're going to go through and say, receive this from aircraft, this from refineries, this from, that would be a huge undertaking.
Another question is, on your carbon credits, you're talking about maybe the farmers being able to take advantage of that sometimes. What do you consider crops that farmers would plant to give you and him the best carbon credits for what you're thinking about? What crops would they be planting?
Well, it's not so much crops as cover crops. It's not a crop that you actually take out of the field. It is between plantings, putting a cover crop in, because then that crop stays in the ground. When you take a crop off the field, you won't generate near the credit as if you plant a cover crop, let that crop absorb carbon, and then stays in the dirt. Because that's the idea, is you're going to get the carbon. The people that are emitting carbon dioxide and want to be able to say that they are carbon neutral, they have to go buy something that sequesters the carbon into the soil, and cover crops will do that. Does that answer your question?
Kind of. Does anybody else have any questions? Representative Hahn?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So if the list is too massive, a list of fees from who pays those in its entirety, since we're the Ag Budget Committee, could you at least give us a list of the fees that farmers and ranchers pay? And the reason I say that is because as a farmer and rancher myself, one of the things that farmers and ranchers sometimes get a bad rap is not being a good environmental steward. I would say we're the first line of stewardship, because if we don't take care of the land, it doesn't take care of us. So if and when we're looking at this budget and we're trying to tighten our belt up, I'd like to know where those farmers and ranchers who are already struggling are actually paying some of those fees. Would that be fair to get that list?
If you would like to narrow it to farmers in general, I can tell you that only the farmers that install an underground storage tank or usually diesel or petroleum, are the only ones paying fees to any of these programs that I can think of. Now, I
So
can
if we-
do some more work, but most of the fees are not paid by farmers.
So if they're farmers and ranchers, I know you mentioned feedlots. I represent probably more cattle than people, so I'd like a list also of the fees that those even small backgrounding yards have to pay. Could you get a list of that for me?
Yeah, if they're running a confined animal feeding operation, their fee is, I believe, $25 a year. But I will get that to you.
That would be great. Thank you so much.
Representative Gardner?
Getting ready there, Mr. Chairman. Leo, thanks for your presentation. You know where I'm probably going to go, which is something we discussed last year, and I believe it was the Air Quality Fee Fund, if I remember correctly.
You do.
Yeah, and if you were going to increase the fee fund last year, and we talked, and you were going to get with the respective organizations that pay that fee and work out some kind of an agreement. How's that been going?
We had 3 stakeholder meetings already. We're going to have another 2 meetings in the next 2 weeks.
Turn it up a little bit, please.
I remain optimistic that we will be able to come to an agreement, but we haven't so far. So we continue to try to work out the concerns. As you remember from the class 2s, who do not want to pay a fee versus the class 1s that have been paying all the fees. So, you know, the class 1s have definitely weighed in on what they think is fair. And we are going to have a meeting with the class 2s and a stakeholder meeting again in the next 2 weeks, hopefully to try to move the ball a little bit.
Okay, Leo, thank you. Is that in the chart that you're showing on the back, Bureau of Air, on the balance of the fee fund, you're projected a negative balance in December 24, is that right? Am I reading that correctly?
It's 25.
January
We feel like
25.
we will be out of money in fiscal year 25. And we
Okay.
started this process early because we frankly knew it was going to be
Sure.
somewhat controversial.
Right.
And
Okay.
we have started the process. We're trying to reach some type of a consensus. When I back up from, we run out of money in FY25, and I know that I have to have a regulation in place in 24 so that I can collect fees in 25. And then from 24, I back up 2 years to get a reg package through. That puts me in 22, which, to be frank, is not really that far away anymore.
Right.
And you know, we have a proviso on the current budget that does not allow us to work on regulations until next year. And hopefully that proviso will go away. But if it doesn't, and we're restrained from holding regs again for a year, we will run out of money because we will not get the reg package out, through, enacted, and collected in time. So again, another huge concern of mine, but we are trying.
Okay. I just wanted to follow up from last year. Thank you, Leo.
Representative Carlin?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Leo, I have asked this every year, I think, but is there any change in the mercury monitoring that was being done years ago? And because I'm asking because of the change in lab equipment, is any of that, I mean, I know it's CARES money for specific things, but how's the mercury?
We still maintain the mercury monitors that have been there for years, and we perform that analytical work. So no, there has not been any changes. We're still monitoring for mercury, and to be honest, mercury concentrations are going down in the state, so it's a good thing.
Yes, it is a good thing, and I wondered if it still was going down. And also, what is the biggest concern about our water? Since I'm not on the water committee, and I don't really want to be, but because I don't want to make those bad decisions or hard decisions, but for the quality of water, is mercury like the big thing, or do you have give me 2 or 3 concerns about our water?
Probably, I would say that from a environmental human health perspective and cost, our biggest concern is nitrates in groundwater. If the nitrates make it to a public water well, there's a 10 part per million requirement that water cannot be above that standard. Our groundwater continues to increase in nitrates, and that trend can be seen all over the state. And the source of that nitrate is usually fertilizer and animal waste. So when we see those nitrates go above the drinking water standard and no longer be used for drinking water, those cities have to put in reverse osmosis or ion exchange systems. That is about a $2 million lift. And if you're a community of 100 or 200 people, that is a huge lift. So, and then you have the ongoing costs. It's a much more complicated system to run. So the person that would actually have to operate that system is going to be, it can't also be the guy that, cleans the streets and everything else in the small communities. So that is probably the #1 concern, because it's an economic impact to the small cities and to large cities. I mean, if it happens to a large city, it's the same, but they can diversify those costs over more people. Probably the next one would be the surface runoff into the streams. As far as sediment, erosion along the fields into the streams, and then that stream being washed down into the lakes and clogging up the lakes with sediment. It hurts our available capacity to hold water for drought. It also tends to make our water in our streams not be compliant with the federal standards. So then we have to go look at those streams and say, okay, how do we get these streams back into compliance for bacteria, for turbidity, and whether it's phosphorus, nitrogen, whatever. So then we have to go into that stream and find out who's adding, let's say, nitrogen to the stream. Most of the time, it's going to be a city wastewater treatment plant. So since that's the only thing we regulate, that's where they have to reduce their nitrate output from that plant to almost zero, which costs them money, because we have to try to bring the stream back into compliance with the EPA standards. So those would be the 2 highest priorities for me. But there's many others. I mean, the uranium in Southwest Kansas, that's an issue. I mean, that's a huge issue, but I don't know if I can fix that one. So I'll stop there.
I thank you very much for that, because, I think we all have to be aware that one of the concerns for our safety of our world is having safe water. And I know that with the current atmosphere worldwide, it could easily be a wartime issue, and I won't go there today, but I'm glad that you're on top of that, and I know that you care a great deal about our water supply. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
We got one more question, Representative Hahn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sir, how many projects do you have going with feedlots in terms of doing any surface water runoff projects? or redirecting some of those water, some of those drainage issues? Do you know off the top of your head?
I would want to get that back to you on that because I don't want to misspeak on this. I want to say there's about 2,000 CAFO's permits. And I just want to clarify one thing. A CAFO is not allowed to allow their waste to go off the site. That's why they have to build lagoons, or they have to put in grass buffer strips so we try to make sure that the facility, when it's permitted, knows what their requirements are to have that permit. And most of the time, especially the large feedlots, that is, the water and the waste goes into a lagoon, then the rancher farms or applies that irrigation water out of those lagoons instead of groundwater. We have to watch that to make sure that he doesn't overload the soil with nitrogen. So they have to take soil samples and come up with a plan and make sure that they're not overloading the soil.
Correct. So what about in a feedlot that has a capacity of 5,000 or less? Let's just say a typical family farm, not a 50,000 plus head capacity, a small family farm. How many of those projects that are, because that takes quite a significant capital outlay for those small farmers and ranchers to get that done. Does the state subsidize part of that, or is that all on the farmer and rancher?
That is on the farmer and rancher, and the large facilities are animals of more than 1,000. A state facility is less than 1,000 to, I believe, 300 head. And then 300 head are only recognized if there's a significant potential to pollute, i.e. if it's a small facility, an 80 head dairy, but that dairy is right next to a stream, then they would be permitted and they would be required to put in something, I won't say what, but something to prevent that waste from washing into the stream.
But the cost is on that producer, correct?
That is correct.
Thank you.
I will say that they can go to USDA, and I think there is some money available there, but it's not through them to us.
Mr. Henning, thank you very much for coming today, and it was great to hear from you.
All right, just to follow up, sir, what are you wanting from me regarding the fees? Do you want me to provide you the fees that we collect?
It would be nice just to see where the fees come from and what segments of Candace or what industry's paying what.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I'll try to put something together and submit it to you, and then.
Thank you.
If this doesn't meet what you think you want, then just get back with me.
Next is Leslie Kaufman with Candace-Ville Electric.
Thank you, Chairman Corbett, Vice Chair Newland, and Ranking Member Carlin. I am Leslie Kaufman with Kansas Electric Cooperatives. I'm here on behalf of KEC. Thank you. I'm here on behalf of KEC and more than 12 other industries and associations that are listed on my testimony. We all have interest in KDHE's Bureau of Air Quality Emissions programs. Those programs that program is financed through fees based on the quantity of emissions releases. As businesses and particularly electric utilities have reduced emissions, the fee amounts have diminished. KDHE staff, as you just heard earlier, thanks to Mr. Gardner's question, indicates that that air quality fee program will run out of money by 2025, fiscal year 2025. This past fall, the Bureau of Air held another series of stakeholder meetings, and the entities, several of those that are involved in these stakeholder meetings are listed on this testimony. As of yet, we have not found full agreement with KDHE regarding the fees, but the dialogue continues. And it is our sincere hope that through these discussions and information exchanges, we will be able to find a workable approach that carries the program forward in a meaningful yet fiscally prudent manner. We value KDHE's programs and prefer dealing with state regulators over the US EPA. But it's important to note that the legislature and the administration can influence the cost of doing business in Kansas. Whether implemented a little at a time or in a large lump sum, fees do add up. And oftentimes industry finds that not only are they being assessed from one program or another program, but from multiple agencies and multiple avenues. Those fees and costs will ultimately be borne by businesses and consumers. And for the utilities that I represent and are noted above here in our testimony, that increased cost impacts ratepayers, who are the very constituents that have elected you all. We firmly believe that when fees are collected, they should remain with the program for which they were intended to benefit. This is more important even in a time when we have a projection that's going to take our fees revenue down to a point where we're going to have to supplement that. Additionally, we support an extension of the proviso in giving us additional time to work with KDHE to find a plan that works for stakeholders and the agency. And I would, hopefully come back with a plan this next year and have something ready for you in the 2020 legislature, provided those discussions continue to go well and be fruitful. The agency, as I said, has reached out, has had some stakeholder meetings, and we appreciate the work that's being done. We do know there is some more ground to cover, and certainly would appreciate any changes in provisos or direction in your budget bill that gives us time to get to a workable solution. I'd be glad to answer any questions, and thank you again for the time to visit with you today.
Thank you. Committee, any questions? Thank you, Leslie.
Thank you.
Keep up the good work.
Thank you.
With that in mind, we're going to close the hearing on KDHE. If there's not any more questions, we're adjourned.